The air tasted of ozone and burning metal. Sergeant Thompson scanned the battlefield, his boots crunching on fractured plasteel, when he saw her a draconis, small and bleeding, her lower body a ruin of scorched flesh and twisted metal. Abandoned. The remnants of a recent draconis ambush lay scattered around him. Toppled armored transports leaking coolant, the acrid stench of plasma burns clinging to the air. His platoon had arrived just after the main attack, mopping up stragglers or, apparently, being the clean-up crew for the dead and dying. He found her pinned beneath a section of twisted durasteel, the metal glowing faintly with residual heat. Her lower body was a mangled mess, limbs crushed and scorched beyond recognition. She was alive, though unconscious, her chest rising and falling in shallow, ragged breaths. Her scaled skin, normally a vibrant emerald green, was dulled with ash and blood. Thompson knelt, his hardened face softening slightly. She couldn't have been more than the equivalent of a human teenager, barely an adult by draconis standards. The casual destruction of something so young, so fragile, made the familiar knot of anger tighten in his gut. He glanced at his chrono. Patrol sweep complete in 15 minutes, then extraction. 15 minutes to confirm the dead, tag the salvageable equipment and get the hell out. Standard operating procedure. The faces flashed in his mind, gaunt, desperate, reaching out from behind the razor wire. The refugees on the lost colony world where he'd grown up. So many left behind, so many deemed expendable. He swept his gaze across the immediate area, double-checking for any signs of remaining hostiles. Nothing moved. The only sounds were the crackling of dying fires and the distant whine of engines. Thompson swore under his breath. Military protocol be damned. He reached for his combat knife, a battered cob bar that had seen more action than he cared to remember. He carefully began to cut away the fused metal pinning her down, the screech of steel on steel a jarring counterpoint to the silence of the dead. As he worked, the full extent of her injuries became clear. Her legs were gone, crushed and burned beyond any hope of recovery. With a grunt, he finally freed her. He shifted her weight, awkwardly hoisting the draconis onto his shoulders in a fireman's carry. She was surprisingly light, but her alien physiology made her balance precarious. Every second counted. The draconis alien moaned softly, a high-pitched keening sound that cut through the battlefield din. She stirred slightly in response to the movement, her head lolling against his back, but remained unconscious. Thompson began moving, his boots sinking slightly into the churned earth and fractured plasteel. He headed toward a derelict outpost a few kilometers away, a crumbling concrete structure that might offer some temporary shelter from the elements and prying eyes. A potential safe haven, however temporary. A distant whine, high-pitched and growing louder, pierced the air. Thompson froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his pulse rifle. A draconis patrol ship, sleek and predatory, was approaching fast, its engines screaming. He cursed silently. He needed to get her somewhere safe now. He ducked behind a wrecked transport, the burned-out chassis offering minimal cover. He pressed himself against the cold metal, the weight of the injured draconis heavy on his shoulders. If that patrol came back, if they found her, she was dead, and so was he. Thompson ducked low, pressing himself and Vega against the cold, scarred plasteel of the anti-vehicle emplacement. The whine of the draconis patrol ship intensified, then faded as it continued its search pattern. He held his breath, the metallic tang of blood and ozone filling his nostrils. Once the sound receded, he straightened, his muscles screaming in protest. Each step towards the derelict outpost was a battle against gravity and exhaustion, Vega's weight a constant reminder of his self-imposed burden. The terrain was unforgiving, a landscape of jagged rocks and twisted metal, each footfall a potential ankle breaker. A groan escaped Vega's lips. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and filled with confusion. She shifted weakly in his arms, her lilac skin slick with a cold sweat. "Easy," Thompson grunted, adjusting his grip. He pointed towards the distant silhouette of the outpost, then mimed a gesture of safety, cupping his hands protectively. Vega blinked, trying to make sense of her surroundings. "Outpost," she rasped, the words slurred and broken. Her galactic standard was rudimentary, fractured by the inflections of her native tongue. Thompson nodded, relief washing over him. She understood something at least. "Thompson," he said, tapping his chest. Then pointing to her, he waited. "Vega," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind. He nodded again, acknowledging her name. A spasm of pain contorted her face. She clutched at her abdomen, her breathing becoming shallow and rapid. The human anti-shock meds were doing more harm than good. Thompson examined her more closely. A faint rash was spreading across her skin, the lilac hue darkening to an angry purple. Her forehead was burning to the touch. Vega's eyes locked onto his, pleading. "Luminium, crystals," she managed, each word an effort. "Need," or she trailed off, her meaning clear. Without the crystals, vital to Draconis physiology, her condition would deteriorate rapidly. He remembered the ambush site, the shattered remains of a supply crate. "Crystals," he repeated, pointing back the way they came. "Back there, I saw." Carefully, he lowered her into a sheltered alcove formed by a collapsed section of the emplacement. "Stay here," he said, his voice firm. "I'll be quick." He couldn't leave her for long, but he had to try. The return trip was a sprint against time. The ambush site was a scene of utter destruction. He spotted the crate, its contents scattered across the scorched earth. Most of the luminium crystals were pulverized, reduced to glittering dust. He sifted through the debris, his fingers searching desperately. Finally, he found a handful of intact crystals, each about the size of his thumb, glowing with a faint inner light. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to buy them some time. A high-pitched whine cut through the air. He froze. A Draconis scout drone, no bigger than his hand, appeared overhead, its multifaceted lenses scanning the terrain. Thompson dropped to the ground, shielding the crystals with his body. He pulled a sheet of torn plasteel over himself, camouflaging his form against the wreckage. The drone hovered for a moment, its sensors briefly targeting his hiding spot before moving on, resuming its patrol pattern. He waited, every muscle tense, until the whine faded into the distance. Clutching the salvaged crystals, Thompson raced back to Vega. She was weaker now, her breathing ragged and shallow. He helped her sit up, offering the crystals. She took them with trembling hands, placing them against her skin, absorbing their energy. A faint blue glow emanated from her body as the crystals worked their restorative magic. Gradually, her fever subsided and the rash began to fade. But she remained weak, utterly dependent on him. He lifted her again, the crystals a small comfort against the crushing weight of responsibility. They resumed their journey to the outpost, the temporary respite offering a fragile hope. As they approached the outpost's entrance, Thompson noticed something that sent a shiver down his spine. The blast doors were slightly ajar, and there were signs of recent scavenging, discarded ration packs, empty energy cells, and footprints in the dust. Someone else had been here, and they might still be inside. Thompson cautiously stepped through the shattered doorway, his pulse rifle raised, its targeting laser painting a crimson dot across the far wall. The air inside the outpost hung thick and stagnant, tasting of dust and decay. Dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting long, dancing shadows that played tricks on the eye. The silence was almost absolute, broken only by the faint hum of failing machinery and the distant whine of the wind. The outpost interior was a ruin. Plasteel walls were scarred with scorch marks and riddled with bullet holes. Overturned furniture lay scattered across the floor, half buried beneath drifts of dust and debris. Empty ration packs and discarded equipment were strewn about, evidence of past battles and desperate scavenging. He found a crude sleeping arrangement tucked into a corner, a tattered thermal blanket and a pile of ripped fabric stained with dried blood. Gnawed bones lay scattered nearby, picked clean. Signs of violence were everywhere: a broken knife, a shattered helmet, a dark stain on the floor that could have been anything. Thompson moved deeper into the outpost, his senses on high alert. He reached a section of the corridor that was relatively intact, and that's when he saw it. A reinforced plasteel door marked with faded medical symbols. A keypad was set into the wall beside it, cold and unresponsive. The medical bay. It could hold vital supplies, perhaps even information about the outpost and its previous occupants. He glanced back at Vega, who remained outside. He'd left her in a relatively sheltered alcove, shielded from the worst of the wind. As if on cue, Vega gasped, her head snapping up. Her normally pale skin flushed with an unsettling violet hue, and her breathing became rapid and shallow. Her good hand clenched into a fist, the knuckles bone white. Thompson cursed under his breath and hurried back to her. "Vega, what's wrong?" She didn't respond, her eyes unfocused, staring blankly ahead. He knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. Her skin felt clammy and cold. "Vega, can you hear me?" She blinked, her eyes slowly regaining focus. "Memories," she whispered, her voice strained. "Pain, abandonment." He realized with a jolt that she was experiencing some kind of telepathic flashback, a fragmented memory of her abandonment on the battlefield. It was clear that her mental state was directly linked to her physical well-being. The trauma was exacerbating her already critical condition. "Easy, Vega," he said, his voice soft and reassuring. "You're safe now. I'm here." He didn't know if she understood him, but he hoped the tone of his voice would convey some comfort. He remembered what the Draconis officer had said about their kind, about their heightened mental abilities and sensitivity. It seemed that Vega's mind was as fragile as her broken body. He needed to get her inside, to find some way to ease her pain. The medical bay was their only hope. He returned to the locked door, his frustration growing. He grabbed the edge of the door with both hands and tried to force it open, but it wouldn't budge. The door was reinforced and sealed tight. It was going to require more than brute force, a code or a keycard, something. He turned back to Vega. "Can you sense anything from the other side of the door?" She closed her eyes, focusing her concentration. A faint tremor ran through her body. After a moment she spoke, her voice barely audible. "Numbers, a sequence, but broken, incomplete." She was sensing the access code, but only fragments of it. It was something, but not enough. Thompson scanned the immediate area, his eyes searching for anything that might help. He spotted a mangled corpse slumped against the wall near the door. The body was clad in the tattered remains of a medical technician's uniform. Beside the body lay a shattered data pad. He knelt beside the corpse, ignoring the stench of decay, and carefully retrieved the data pad. The screen was cracked and flickering, but he could still make out some of the information displayed. Fragments of code, schematics of the medical bay's security system. The data pad was heavily corrupted, but it might contain the missing pieces of the access code. He worked quickly, his fingers flying across the unresponsive touchscreen, trying to extract any usable information. The data pad coughed and sputtered, displaying error messages and distorted images. But amidst the chaos, he managed to piece together a partial code, 7-3, followed by a series of scrambled symbols. He turned to Vega. "Okay, I have part of the code, 7-3. Can you fill in the rest?" She closed her eyes again, focusing her mental energy, her brow furrowed in concentration. After a long moment, she whispered, 6-9-7-3-6-9. He entered the sequence into the keypad. Nothing. He cursed under his breath. It wasn't enough. There were still missing digits. He tried different combinations, but none of them worked. The door remained stubbornly locked. Then, with a metallic click, the lock partially disengaged. A red light on the keypad flickered, then turned solid green. But at the same time, a high-pitched whine filled the air, barely audible but definitely there. A silent alarm. Damn it, Thompson swore. He knew what that meant. The outpost wasn't as abandoned as he'd thought. Someone else was here, and they were now alerted to their presence. He grabbed Vega and pulled her further into the outpost, away from the door. "We have company," he said grimly, "and they're not going to be friendly." He found a relatively defensible position near a collapsed section of the corridor, providing some cover from the main entrance. He positioned Vega behind a stack of overturned crates, hoping they would offer some protection. "Stay here," he said, his voice low and urgent, "and stay quiet." He checked his pulse rifle, ensuring the power cell was fully charged. He had a limited amount of ammunition, and he knew he couldn't afford to waste a single shot. A moment later, he heard them. The sound of approaching footsteps echoing through the deserted corridors. Scavengers. Desperate individuals driven to violence by the endless war. They were probably after anything they could salvage. Weapons, equipment, rations. And now they were after him and Vega. The scavengers emerged from the shadows, a ragtag group clad in scavenged armor and wielding makeshift weapons. They were a motley crew, humans and aliens, their faces hardened by desperation and violence. "Well, well, well," one of them sneered, his voice raspy and cruel. "Looks like we got ourselves some visitors." Thompson didn't respond. He raised his pulse rifle and opened fire. The outpost erupted in a cacophony of sound. The crackle of pulse rifles, the screams of the wounded, the clang of metal on metal. Thompson moved with practiced efficiency, using the outpost's layout to his advantage, taking cover behind walls and crates, firing in short, controlled bursts. Vega, despite her weakness, used her telekinesis to subtly aid Thompson. She telekinetically nudged a loose piece of plasteel, causing it to fall and distract one of the scavengers. She subtly tugged at another's weapon, throwing off his aim. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give Thompson a slight edge. He managed to take down the initial wave of attackers, but more were approaching. Their numbers were overwhelming him. He was running low on ammunition, and he knew he couldn't hold them off forever. Suddenly, one of the scavengers hurled a grenade towards Thompson and Vega's location. It bounced off a crate and landed just a few feet away, hissing ominously. Thompson knew he had only a split second to react. The world exploded in white-hot pain. Thompson threw himself over Vega, the grenade detonating an instant later. The blast wave slammed into his back, a searing agony that stole his breath. Plasteel shrapnel whizzed past, tearing at his armor. The air crackled with electricity and the acrid stench of ozone filled his nostrils. He gasped, his ears ringing, vision swimming. Above him, dust and debris rained down from the partially collapsed ceiling. He pushed himself up, ignoring the sharp stabs of pain lancing through his side. "Vega, you all right?" She coughed, her large eyes wide with shock but otherwise seemed unharmed. I am intact, Sergeant." More shouts echoed from the corridor. The scavengers were pressing their attack. "We gotta move," Thompson grunted, struggling to his feet. His left arm hung limp, likely dislocated. He heaved Vega up, supporting her weight as best he could. "Medical bay. It's our only shot." They stumbled down the corridor, Thompson favoring his injured side. The scavengers were gaining on them, their ragged weapons spitting plasma fire that chewed chunks out of the walls. He risked a glance back, seeing the glint of their crude armor and the feral hunger in their eyes. Reaching the medical bay door, Thompson banged his hand against the access panel. Sparks flew as he punched in the partial code he'd salvaged earlier. Come on," he muttered, sweat stinging his eyes. The lock stubbornly refused to disengage. He drew his sidearm, firing a burst into the panel, overloading the circuits with a final surge of power. The door hissed open with a groan. They lurched inside, Thompson slamming the heavy door shut and frantically engaging the manual locking mechanism. A series of metallic thunks echoed as the scavengers hammered against the other side, their frustrated roars vibrating through the plasteel. The medical bay was eerily pristine, a stark contrast to the ravaged outpost. Gleaming white surfaces reflected the soft blue light emanating from overhead panels. Rows of medical equipment lined the walls, their displays dark but intact. The air smelled sterile, almost antiseptic. Thompson leaned against the door, catching his breath. Safe, for now. He slid down to the floor, wincing. He needed to assess the damage. Vega remained standing, her gaze sweeping across the room, a strange mix of curiosity and apprehension in her eyes. He pulled open his armor, revealing a nasty gash across his ribs where shrapnel had pierced the protective plating. It wasn't life-threatening, but it needed attention. He rummaged through a nearby cabinet, finding a medkit containing bandages, sealant, and a stim pack. "Help me with this." Vega approached cautiously. Her gaze fell upon a series of large pod-like devices lining one wall. Intricate control panels adorned their surfaces, displaying complex Draconis script. These are for mending battle wounds, for soldiers whose legs are damaged, whose spines are broken. Her voice was barely a whisper. Thompson grunted, applying sealant to his wound. "Can you work them?" She shook her head, her dark green hair swaying. "They require a diagnostic, a vocal command, in the Draconis tongue, and even then." She trailed off, her expression unreadable. Thompson frowned. He needed to get those machines working. There's gotta be a way. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on a small, handheld device lying on a nearby table. It was clearly Draconis in origin, its smooth, obsidian surface etched with intricate patterns. "What's this?" Vega hesitated. "A diagnostic tool, but it needs voice activation. Can you do it?" She flinched, her eyes darting away. I do not know if I can." He studied her, sensing her reluctance. "What's wrong?" Her voice was barely audible. "The diagnostic. It reveals weakness. It shows everything." A flicker of memory, not her own, washed over Thompson. A memory of a battlefield, of seeing Vega injured and alone, abandoned by her own kind. A new understanding dawned on him. "They left you to die, didn't they?" Vega remained silent, her face a mask of pain. Then a rapid series of images flashed through her mind. A training ground, harsh and unforgiving. A training accident. Vega, younger, her legs crushed beneath a malfunctioning energy weapon. A Draconis doctor, cold and impassive, looking down at her with disdain. "Waste of resources," the doctor had said, his voice devoid of emotion. "She will never be a warrior now." Thompson saw it all, the memory bleeding into his mind. He grit his teeth, his grip tightening on the diagnostic tool. He wouldn't let her be victimized again. "I can do it," he said, his voice firm. He studied the symbols on the device, listening intently to the faint hum it emitted. He recalled the few Draconis phrases he'd picked up from intercepted communications over the past few weeks. It was a long shot, but he had to try. He took a deep breath and, mimicking the intonation he'd heard, spoke the Draconis words. "Audic, Diagnostica, Vectoruk." The device hummed louder, its obsidian surface glowing with a soft green light. A beam of energy shot out, scanning Vega's body. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing a complex schematic of Draconis anatomy. A torrent of data streamed across the screen, displaying medical records, diagnostic readings, and treatment protocols. Thompson whistled softly. Jackpot. He began scrolling through the information, his eyes scanning for anything that could help them. Suddenly, a harsh, metallic voice crackled from the outpost's comm system. "Unidentified vessel, this is Draconis Patrol Ship Vanguard. Identify yourself immediately." Thompson froze. They had been detected. Outside, the scavengers renewed their assault on the medical bay door, their hammering growing more frantic. The plasteel groaned under the relentless onslaught. The door wouldn't hold for long. The blast door buckled inward, showering sparks as the scavengers hammered it with plasma torches. Thompson gritted his teeth, each breath a ragged rasp against the burning pain in his side. His leg throbbed, each step a reminder of the shrapnel still lodged deep within the muscle. He raised his rifle, the barrel wavering slightly. The door finally gave way with a screech of tortured metal. Two scavengers, clad in patchwork armor and wielding crude energy weapons, charged into the medical bay. Thompson squeezed the trigger, sending a pulse of energy slamming into the lead scavenger's chest. The scavenger crumpled, his armor offering little resistance. The second scavenger roared, leveling his weapon. A shot whizzed past Thompson's ear, searing the air. He ducked behind a medical console, returning fire. The scavenger staggered, clutching his arm, but kept advancing. Thompson glanced towards Vega. She was huddled against the wall, her violet skin ashen, her eyes wide with terror. She hadn't moved, hadn't even blinked. The memory of her abandonment, the betrayal etched on her face, seemed to have paralyzed her. Not now, Thompson thought, his heart pounding. He lunged from behind the console, slamming the butt of his rifle into the scavenger's face. The scavenger went down hard, his weapon clattering across the floor. Thompson didn't hesitate. He stomped on the scavenger's throat, ending the fight quickly and brutally. He needed to protect Vega. He turned back to her, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Vega, are you all right?" She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on some unseen horror. He knelt beside her, placing a hand on her arm. Her skin was cold and clammy. "Vega," he shook her gently. "Vega, look at me." Her eyes flickered, focusing on him with a dazed expression. They left me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know," Thompson said softly, "but I'm not going to leave you, I promise." He noticed something else then. Her skin was paler than usual, almost gray. Her body trembled uncontrollably. He quickly scanned the medical console, pulling up her vitals. "Damn it," he muttered. Her readings were plummeting. He scrolled through the records, finding a notation about Draconis physiology. Requires regular intake of specific crystalline compounds for metabolic function. Withdrawal symptoms include. The list was long and grim. Vega was sick and she was getting worse fast. She needed those crystals. Thompson accessed the facility's schematics. A map shimmered into existence above the console, highlighting different sections of the complex. His eyes scanned the layout, searching for anything that might help. "Cryo-storage," he murmured, spotting a section labeled in faded Oribesh. "That's got to be it." He looked back at Vega, her condition deteriorating rapidly. He knew what he had to do. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was their only chance. "I'm going to get you those crystals," he said, his voice firm. "I'll be right back." He found the cryo chamber access point with surprising ease. The room was a vast, echoing space filled with rows upon rows of stasis pods. Inside, Draconis soldiers floated in suspended animation, their faces serene and unreadable. He moved quickly, his boots echoing on the metal floor, searching for the control panel. He found it near the far wall, a complex array of buttons and displays. He bypassed the security protocols, his fingers flying across the controls. He needed to wake one of them up, get information, and get out. He selected a single pod, targeting a Draconis soldier with high-ranking insignia on her uniform. He initiated the revival sequence. Flashback. A younger Vega stood at attention before a stern-faced Draconis officer. "Discipline, cadet," the officer barked, her voice sharp and unforgiving. "Weakness is a luxury we cannot afford." The cryopod hissed open, releasing a cloud of vapor. The Draconis soldier stumbled out, blinking in the sudden light. Her eyes, cold and calculating, landed on Thompson. "Human," she hissed, her voice infused with contempt. Then her gaze shifted, focusing on something behind him. Her eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with fury. "Access code. Vega." Before Thompson could react, she lunged at him, her movements surprisingly fast for someone just revived from cryo-sleep. He sidestepped the attack, grabbing her arm and twisting it behind her back. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice strained. "I just need information." "You will get nothing from me," she spat, struggling against his grip. "Especially not for that traitoress, that cripple." Thompson tightened his grip, ignoring the pain in his leg. "She needs crystals. Where are they?" The Draconis soldier snarled, her eyes filled with hatred. I would rather die than help you. Thompson knew he was running out of time. Vega's life hung in the balance. He pressed his weapon against the soldier's head. "Tell me," he growled, his voice low and menacing. The soldier hesitated, her defiance wavering. Death stared her in the face. "Sector Gamma 9, she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Crystal storage, but it is heavily guarded." Suddenly, the soldier went rigid. Her eyes glazed over and she slumped against him, unconscious. "Vega." Thompson released the soldier, letting her fall to the floor. He turned to Vega, his heart pounding. He had the information, but the cost. He dragged himself back to her, his legs screaming in protest. He lifted her limp body, supporting her weight. "Sector Gamma 9, he gasped, his breath ragged. "We have to go." The Draconis ship continued to broadcast its demands, the voice echoing through the facility. "Vega, surrender yourself. Your actions are a disgrace to our people. Return immediately and you may yet be spared." He stumbled through the corridors, his vision blurring. Each step was an agony, but he couldn't stop. He had to get to those crystals. Finally, he reached the entrance to Sector Gamma 9. The corridor was lined with automated security turrets, their barrels swiveling menacingly. Red lights flashed, bathing the area in an ominous glow. Vega stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open. She looked towards the end of the corridor, her gaze fixed on something beyond the turrets. "Crystals," she whispered, her voice weak. Then her body went limp. She slumped against him, unconscious once more. The crystal withdrawal had taken its toll. At that moment, the turrets opened fire. Energy bolts ripped through the air, tearing chunks out of the walls. Thompson threw himself to the ground, shielding Vega's body with his own. He felt a searing pain in his shoulder, another bolt finding its mark. He had to reach those crystals. He had to save her. But how? The turrets were relentless, their fire unwavering. And the Draconis ship. It was getting closer. Thompson coughed, the metallic tang of blood filling his mouth. His ears rang, a souvenir from the close blast. He risked a glance back at Vega, still unconscious. He had to move, and fast. The twin turrets continued their relentless barrage, chewing up the plasteel floor where he'd been moments before. He needed to get to those crystal storage containers, and quickly. Despite the throbbing pain in his side, Thompson low crawled, using the scattered debris as cover. Each burst of energy from the turrets sent shrapnel singing through the air. Conventional tactics were suicide. He needed a distraction. Reaching into his utility belt, he pulled out a plasma grenade and a small EMP detonator. Not ideal, but it was all he had. He quickly rewired the grenade, connecting it to the EMP. It wouldn't disable the turrets permanently, but it would create a momentary blind spot. He tossed the modified grenade, timing the detonation perfectly. The EMP flared, disrupting the turret's targeting systems for a precious few seconds. In that window, Thompson sprinted, adrenaline masking the pain, towards the containers, each step a gamble. As he reached the relative safety of the container wall, he heard a faint sound in his mind. A whisper. "Thompson, hurry, Vega." She was awake, but barely. Her voice, a raw, untutored thing, echoed in his thoughts, bypassing language entirely. "The crystals, I need them, now." He pressed his hand to his helmet, trying to focus. "What crystals? What's happening?" "My body, it needs the energy, Draconis. We absorb energy from the crystals. Without it, I die." Her mental voice was weak, fading in and out like a dying comm signal. "The blue ones, concentrated energy, they are in the storage containers." Thompson cursed under his breath. He knew alien biology was weird, but this was a new level of weird. "Why can't you just eat something?" "Eat?" He could sense her confusion. "We do not eat in the human sense. We require the crystalline matrix for energy transduction. The crystals resonate with our internal structures. Without them, our bioelectric field collapses." Thompson didn't understand half of what she was saying, but the urgency in her voice was unmistakable. He had to get those crystals. Now. He risked another glance around the corner. The turrets were back online, their targeting lasers sweeping the area. He had to be fast. He sprinted again, weaving between the containers, using his tactical training to predict the turret's firing patterns. Each step was agony, but he pushed through, driven by Vega's fading mental presence. He reached the designated container, marked with a draconis symbol he didn't recognize. Inside, he could see rows of shimmering blue crystals, pulsing with an inner light. But there was a problem. A shimmering energy shield blocked access to the crystals. A security lock, of course. He pulled out his multi-tool, a compact device containing a variety of electronic probes and bypasses. "All right, Vega, I'm in front of the container. There's a shield. I'm going to try to bypass the lock, but I need your help. Any idea how this draconis tech works? The frequency, it fluctuates. Disrupt the harmonic resonance. Overload the gate." Her voice was stronger now, clearer. Thompson nodded, even though she couldn't see him. He began probing the control panel, searching for the correct frequency. He needed to find the sweet spot, the resonant frequency that would overload the system. He worked quickly, his fingers flying across the controls. Almost. There, higher frequency. Modulate the pulse. Now. Following her instructions, Thompson adjusted the settings. The shield flickered, then sputtered, then vanished with a soft pop. For a moment, the room was silent, save for the hum of the turrets. Then, without warning, a surge of telekinetic energy erupted from Vega. One of the turrets spun wildly, its targeting lasers firing erratically into the ceiling before grinding to a halt, sparking and smoking. The mental strain was evident, even to Thompson. "Take the crystal, go." Her mental voice was a ragged whisper. Thompson didn't hesitate. He reached into the container, grabbed one of the pulsing blue crystals, and sprinted back towards Vega, clutching the crystal tightly in his hand. As he neared her position, the disabled turret sputtered back to life, its targeting laser locking onto him. He dove for cover just as a blast of energy seared the air where he'd been standing. He scrambled to Vega's side, panting. "Here, take it." He pressed the crystal into her hand. Vega closed her eyes and the crystal began to glow, its blue light intensifying. She seemed to absorb the energy directly into her skin. Her breathing evened out and the color returned to her face. Her mental presence strengthened, filling his mind with a sense of gratitude. Then, a new sound, the unmistakable roar of a draconis landing ship. It was close, very close. Vega opened her eyes, her gaze sharp and focused. A faint blue aura surrounded her. "They are here." She extended her hand and the scattered debris around them began to tremble. "I can hold them for a moment, but we must leave now." The metal door to the crystal room buckled inward with a loud crash. Thompson scooped Vega up into his arms. "Hold on." He stood, Vega cradled in his arms, and considered their options. Stay and fight, or escape. He glanced at Vega. She was still weak, but her eyes burned with a newfound grit. He knew the answer. "We're getting out of here," Thompson said, his voice grim. He turned and ran, Vega held tight against his chest, towards the only exit, the shattered doorway that now led into the unknown. The draconis were coming, and they were coming fast. Familiar. Thompson's muscles screamed in protest with each step, the weight of Vega a constant, grinding ache. The facility's emergency lights flickered erratically, casting long, dancing shadows that made every corridor seem like a predatory mouth. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of blood and the acrid stench of burnt circuitry. "They are shifting," Vega murmured, her voice a strained whisper against his ear. "To the west, a patrol of 4. Thompson adjusted his grip, his boots crunching on shattered plasteel. "West it is. Thanks, Vega." He altered course, trusting her senses. He'd learned quickly that her telepathic awareness was far more reliable than the facility's defunct sensors. Each step was a gamble, a silent prayer that they wouldn't stumble into another firefight. They reached a heavy, blast-sealed door, its surface scarred with laser burns. A red light pulsed ominously above the access panel. "Locked down," Thompson grunted, setting Vega down gently against the wall. "High-level access code required. Damn it." He ran his fingers over the panel, searching for a manual override. "Stand back," he muttered, pulling out his multi-tool. He attempted to bypass the security protocols, sparks flying as he manipulated the internal wiring. "These Draconis don't make things easy." I can try," Vega offered hesitantly. Thompson paused, his brow furrowed. "Try what?" "Blowing the door off its hinges with your mind." "No," she said, wincing slightly. "I can reach out to one of the soldiers, sense their access code." Thompson stared at her, his expression a mixture of disbelief and concern. "You mean read their mind?" "Vega, I don't know about that. That's a serious violation." He flashed back to his childhood, images of his mother's face as she warned him not to pry into other people's affairs. "It is the only way," she insisted, her silver eyes pleading. And I would only take the code, nothing else." He hesitated, weighing the options. Time was running out. "All right," he said finally, his voice tight. "But be careful, don't go digging around in their heads, just get the code and get out." Vega closed her eyes, her brow furrowing in concentration. A moment later she gasped, her body trembling. "I have it," she whispered, her voice strained. "Code 7 Alpha 9 Delta." Thompson quickly input the code into the panel. The red light flickered, then turned green with a soft click. The heavy door hissed open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit maintenance tunnel. "Thanks, Vega," Thompson said, relief washing over him. "But are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "It is unpleasant," she admitted, shaking her head. "To be inside another's mind, there is much anger, much fear." Thompson hoisted her back into his arms. "I can only imagine. We'll try to avoid that in the future, okay?" The tunnel was cramped and claustrophobic, the air thick with the smell of ozone and dust. Damaged cables snaked across the floor, sparking intermittently. They moved quickly, the only sound their footsteps echoing in the narrow space. The tunnel opened into a larger, abandoned section of the facility. Decayed equipment lay scattered across the floor, covered in a thick layer of grime. A flickering holographic display showed a distorted image of a Draconis soldier. "This place is a graveyard," Thompson muttered, scanning the room. In the corner, he spotted a damaged communication console, its screen cracked and its casing melted. A faint, garbled distress signal pulsed weakly from its speakers. "Hold on," Thompson said, carefully placing Vega on a relatively clean section of the floor. "Let's see if I can get this thing working." He knelt down, his fingers flying across the console's damaged controls. He bypassed damaged circuits, rerouted power, and replaced a blown capacitor, his movements precise and efficient. "What are you doing?" Vega asked, watching him intently. "Trying to call for help," Thompson replied, his voice focused. "Or at least bait the Draconis into thinking we're trying to call for help." After several tense minutes, the console sputtered back to life, the distress signal now clearer, though still weak and distorted. "This is Sergeant Douglas Thompson, United Earth Marine," he said into the microphone, his voice clear and strong. "We are under attack and require immediate assistance. Repeat, we are under attack and require immediate assistance. Our location is..." He rattled off the facility's coordinates. A crackling voice responded, faint and garbled. "Thompson, can you repeat? Location, Scavenger." "Did you hear that?" Thompson asked, his eyes widening in disbelief. Someone actually answered. "Scavenger?" Vega questioned. "A ship that picks up scraps and salvage from battlefields," Thompson explained. "Not exactly the cavalry, but it's something." He repeated their location, adding a warning. "Draconis forces are in pursuit. Approach with extreme caution." As he finished speaking, Vega's hand tightened on his arm. "They are close," she said, her voice urgent. "Very close." Thompson grabbed Vega and sprinted towards a loading dock at the far end of the room. A single, damaged escape pod sat cradled in a launch bay, its hull scarred and blackened. "Jackpot," Thompson muttered, his hope rising. He set Vega down and began inspecting the escape pod. "But of course, it's not going to be easy." He ran his hand along a gaping tear in the hull. "Needs a new sealant, the guidance system is fried, and..." He peered inside the cockpit. Damn it, the hyperdrive regulator is missing. Hyperdrive regulator? Vega asked, her voice tinged with disappointment. Yeah, without it, we're not going anywhere fast, Thompson said, his shoulders slumping. It's a rare component. We're not going to find one of those lying around. Vega closed her eyes, focusing her mental energy. I believe such a component is held in the armory. It is heavily guarded. Thompson looked at Vega, then back at the damaged escape pod. He knew what they had to do. The armory it is. Hold on tight, Vega. He tightened his grip on her, steeling himself for what lay ahead. That's our best bet. Thompson gripped his pulse rifle tighter, the metal cold against his sweaty palm. They moved deeper into the maintenance corridors, the air thick with the metallic tang of ozone and the low thrum of dormant machinery. Condensation dripped from overhead pipes, each drop echoing in the oppressive silence. Vega, riding precariously on his back, shifted slightly. Patrol, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hum. Ahead, Draconis, numerous. Thompson cursed silently. How far? Close, very close they are. Agitated. He veered sharply to the left, forcing them down a narrower passage barely wider than his shoulders. Scraped plasteel groaned against his armor. Damn it. Where are we going now? Detour, Vega replied, her voice strained. Towards deactivated sector. The corridor opened into a vast chamber, dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. Row upon row of deactivated combat drones stood silently, like metallic ghosts. Dust motes danced in the weak light, coating everything in a layer of decay. The air hung heavy with the smell of stale lubricant and forgotten battles. Thompson scanned the scene, his rifle raised, creepy. He paused by a wall display, its screen cracked and faded. A schematic barely visible depicted advanced medical equipment. His eyes narrowed, focusing on a diagram of an exoskeletal suit. He reached out to touch the screen, a flicker of hope in his gaze. Thompson, Vega's voice was urgent. Stop, I sense intense negative emotions. From that direction, she pointed with a trembling hand towards a darkened section of the chamber. Distress, pain, despair. He hesitated, then followed her gaze. A prisoner. They moved cautiously towards the source of the emotions, the air growing colder with each step. A low, guttural moan echoed from the shadows. They reached a holding cell, its energy bars deactivated. Inside, a lone Draconis prisoner lay huddled on the floor, his armor torn, his face bruised and bloodied. He looked up, his eyes filled with desperate pleading. Help me, he rasped, his voice weak. Please, they've wrongly accused me. I'm a political dissident. They'll execute me. Vega gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He is telling the truth. I can feel it. Thompson remained wary, his rifle still raised. We can't afford to trust anyone, not now. But he needs our help, Vega insisted, her voice pleading. He's injured, defenseless. The prisoner struggled to sit up, wincing in pain. The component you seek. It's locked in a secure vault within the armory. It requires my biosignature to access. Without me, you'll never get past the security protocols. Thompson's teeth clenched. He was trapped. Trusting this prisoner was a gamble, a potentially fatal one, but leaving him to die meant facing even greater odds at the armory. He glanced at Vega, her face etched with concern. Please, Thompson, she urged. It's the right thing to do. He looked back at the prisoner, his eyes filled with a mixture of suspicion and pity. He thought of the faces he'd seen on the colony world, the faces of those who had been abandoned. He made a decision. All right, he said, his voice firm. We'll help you, but one wrong move. He deactivated the cell's energy field. The prisoner, weak and trembling, stumbled to his feet. Thompson moved closer, offering a supporting arm. Thank you, the prisoner whispered, his voice choked with emotion. I know a shortcut to the armory, but be warned. It's heavily guarded. As they moved towards the shortcut, the prisoner subtly shifted his weight, his hand inching towards the pulse rifle slung across Thompson's back. Vega gasped, her mind reaching out, sensing the prisoner's treacherous intent. Thompson, behind you! Thompson, behind you! Thompson whirled, the warning a split second ahead of the Draconis prisoner lunging. The alien's cuffed hands, surprisingly strong, scraped against Thompson's armored vest as he tried to grab the discarded pulse rifle. Reacting instinctively, Thompson slammed the butt of his own weapon into the Draconis's jaw. A sickening crack echoed in the cramped space. The prisoner slumped, momentarily stunned, giving Thompson the chance to kick the pulse rifle away. He stomped on the weapon, crushing its power cell. "Damn it," Thompson growled, leveling his sidearm at the prisoner. The Draconis, regaining his senses, spat a mouthful of violet blood onto the grimy floor. "You don't understand. They promised me leniency, my family." He scrambled backward, trying to reach a ventilation shaft. "I had to bring you in." Thompson didn't hesitate. He fired a stun blast, the blue energy bolt slamming into the Draconis's chest. The prisoner convulsed and fell still. But the brief struggle had been too loud. A high-pitched, guttural Draconis war cry echoed from the corridor outside. "Guards," Vega hissed, her violet eyes wide with alarm. Thompson grabbed Vega, pulling her behind a stack of overturned crates. Pulse fire ripped through the storage area, shredding metal and sending sparks flying. Thompson returned fire, blindly aiming towards the entrance. "Move," he yelled, shoving Vega ahead of him. A stray shot grazed Thompson's arm, searing through his armor. He grunted in pain but kept moving, prioritizing Vega's safety. They scrambled through the maze of crates, the sounds of pursuing guards growing closer. Finally, they squeezed into a narrow space between two towering stacks of cargo, the darkness offering a temporary reprieve. Thompson pressed his hand against his wounded arm, wincing. The pain was manageable, but the acrid smell of burning flesh was a stark reminder of their precarious situation. "Damn it all," he muttered, his voice tight with frustration. "I'm starting to think our helpful prisoner was feeding us a load of bantha fodder. You sure about this biosignature lock?" Vega's luminous eyes flickered with a mixture of concern and defiance. "The biosignature lock is real, I can feel it. His information about that is accurate, I am sure of it, but I am not sure about the layout of the armory." Thompson sighed, running a hand through his close cropped hair. He glanced at his arm, the wound needed attention. "I need to get this cauterized, but I can't risk going to a med bay." "Then do not," Vega stated firmly. "I will go, you stay here and recover." Thompson's head snapped up. "Absolutely not, I'm not letting you go in there alone." Vega met his gaze, her expression resolute. "It is our only option. You are injured, I am not, and I can open the vault." Thompson hesitated, torn between his protective instincts and the cold logic of their situation. He knew she was right, he was slowing them down. "Damn it," he repeated, quieter this time. "All right, but you need a plan, and it needs to be airtight." Vega's eyes gleamed with newfound confidence. "I have a plan. The armory's security systems are designed to respond to Draconis physiology. I can use my telekinesis to disrupt them, to make them malfunction. I can manipulate the energy fields, overload the sensors." Her voice trailed off as she focused, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I can feel the armory's systems like a part of my own mind." Thompson listened intently, the glimmer of hope growing within him. He pulled out the crumpled schematic the prisoner had provided, spreading it out on a crate. "Okay, here's what we know, or at least what he said we know. The main entrance is heavily guarded, pressure plates in the corridor, laser grids covering the main floor, cameras everywhere. But if the prisoner was lying..." He modified the schematic, taking the possible unreliabilities into account. For the next hour, Thompson drilled Vega on the armory layout, pointing out potential traps and alternative routes. He gathered small pieces of scrap metal and positioned them around the cramped space. "All right, Vega, camera 1, disable it." Vega closed her eyes, her brow furrowing. The metal shard in front of her trembled, then slowly rose into the air. It wobbled for a moment before shooting forward, slamming into an imaginary camera lens with a satisfying thunk. "Pressure plate," Thompson instructed, pointing to a spot on the floor. Again, Vega concentrated. This time, she focused on lifting the pressure plate just enough to break the circuit without triggering an alarm. It was slow, painstaking work, but her control was improving with each attempt. Finally, Thompson stopped her. He looked into her eyes, his expression serious. "This is it, Vega. You've got this. You're smart, you're resourceful, and you're stronger than you think. I trust you." Vega's violet eyes shone, reflecting the flickering light of the storage area. A faint smile touched her lips. "I will not fail you, Thompson." With a final nod, she turned and slipped into the shadows, disappearing into the labyrinthine storage area. Thompson watched her go, his heart pounding in his chest. He felt a mixture of pride and anxiety, a potent cocktail of emotions he hadn't experienced in years. He was sending her into a dangerous situation, relying on her abilities and his own judgment. Vega crept along the darkened corridors, the hum of the station's ventilation system the only sound. She reached the armory entrance, her senses on high alert. 2 Draconis guards patrolled back and forth, their pulse rifles held at the ready. Taking a deep breath, Vega focused her mind. She reached out, her telekinetic tendrils probing the station's systems. She found the fire alarm control panel for Sector Gamma, 3 levels above. With a flick of her mental wrist, she triggered the alarm. A piercing siren wailed through the station, and she could hear the distant shouts of the guards as some of them ran to investigate. Now was her chance. She moved swiftly towards the armory doors, her heart pounding in her chest. But as she reached the entrance, a red light flashed on the wall above. A section of the wall slid open, revealing an automated sentry turret, its weapons swiveling to target her position. Vega reacted without conscious thought, her mind already calculating trajectories and probabilities. The sentry turret swiveled, its multi-barreled autocannon spitting a stream of superheated plasma that chewed chunks out of the durasteel wall beside her. Telekinetic force ripped a nearby maintenance panel free, the metal groaning in protest as it became a makeshift shield. Sparks showered down, the air thick with the acrid smell of ozone as the panel absorbed the initial volley. But the turret was relentless, its targeting algorithms compensating for the improvised defense. Vega felt the panel shuddering in her grip, the heat searing even through her telekinetic barrier. She retreated, her mind racing, analyzing the turret's movements, its firing patterns. There had to be a weakness. Then she saw it, the subtle flicker of the visual sensors, the turret's reliance on line of sight. A primitive design flaw in an otherwise sophisticated system. Earlier, while navigating the labyrinthine corridors, she had salvaged a smoke grenade from a fallen Draconis soldier. Now, she focused her will, delicately manipulating the grenade's pin with her telekinesis. A soft hiss and a cloud of dense gray smoke billowed outwards, obscuring the turret's vision. The autocannon stuttered, its firing rate slowing as the sensors struggled to penetrate the smoke. Now, Vega telekinetically gathered small pieces of debris, shattered plasteel, severed wires, even the discarded pin from the grenade, and with pinpoint accuracy, jammed them into the turret's rotating mechanism. A high-pitched whine, a grinding of gears, and then silence. The turret was temporarily disabled. Vega didn't hesitate. She propelled herself forward, squeezing through the armory entrance before the smoke cleared and the turret could fully recover. Inside, a latticework of crimson laser grids crisscrossed the room, protecting racks of advanced weaponry and sophisticated equipment. The air hummed with contained energy, a silent warning against intrusion. She remembered the prisoner's description. The human Marine, Thompson, had relayed everything he could remember. He had told her of a hidden control panel, a backdoor into the system. Vega scanned the walls, her telekinetic senses probing for concealed access points. She found it, tucked away behind a deactivated coolant regulator, but this wasn't going to be easy. Pressure sensors lined the floor and infrared tripwires snaked across the walls, creating a complex web of detection. One wrong step, and the alarm would blare. Vega closed her eyes, focusing her telekinetic abilities. Slowly, meticulously, she lifted individual floor panels, repositioning them to create a safe path, a series of floating islands in a sea of danger. The air shimmered around her as she exerted her will, the strain building in her mind. Finally, she reached the control panel. It was small, unassuming, but protected by a complex biosignature scanner. A wave of disappointment washed over her. The prisoner had mentioned this, a draconian security measure. She attempted to bypass the lock, mimicking the required energy pattern with her telekinesis, carefully replicating the complex frequencies. But the scanner was too sophisticated, too precise. A shrill alarm pierced the air, bathing the armory in flashing red light. Reinforcements would be here soon. Desperate, Vega channeled all her energy into overloading the scanner, hoping to fry its circuits, to disable it completely. The device pulsed with raw power, the air crackling with static electricity. The attempt was partially successful. The alarm system went silent, but a new, more ominous klaxon began to wail. A synthesized voice announced, "Security lockdown initiated. All exits sealed." She was trapped inside the armory with the very equipment she had come to secure and no way out. Vega took a deep breath, fighting down the rising panic. She scanned the armory, her telekinetic senses reaching into every corner, every crevice. Then she found it a hidden compartment, concealed behind a false wall. With a surge of telekinetic force, she ripped the panel away, revealing its contents. Inside, bathed in soft blue light, stood a draconian exosuit, but this was no standard model. This was an advanced prototype, sleek and powerful, far more sophisticated than anything she had seen before. Its surface shimmered with integrated energy shields, and its limbs were articulated with a grace that belied its immense strength. The lockdown prevented any guards from entering, giving Vega time to familiarize herself with the exosuit, time to understand its systems, time to prepare. She reached out with her mind, probing the suit's intricate neural interface, sensing that this was her key, her only hope of escaping and fulfilling her mission. A jolt of pure agony ripped through Vega's mind as the exosuit's neural interface slammed into place. It felt like molten metal being poured directly into her brain, a brutal intrusion that threatened to overwhelm her consciousness. The pain subsided into a throbbing ache, overlaid with a torrent of raw data flooding her senses. This wasn't the smooth, intuitive link she'd hoped for. This suit, it was designed for a warrior, a draconian warrior with fully functioning limbs, not a cripple abandoned to die. The realization stung, a bitter reminder of her perceived weakness. The exosuit's internal diagnostics confirmed her fears. Every movement was calibrated for a body she no longer possessed. She tried to take a step, or rather, command the exosuit to take a step. The result was a violent lurch, the metal limbs jerking forward in an uncontrolled spasm. Vega gasped, fighting to maintain her mental grip on the system. The suit felt alien, hostile, mocking her every attempt at control. No, she wouldn't be defeated. Focusing her mind, Vega reached out with her telekinesis, not to force the suit, but to guide it. She visualized the movement, smoothing out the jerky motions, anticipating the suit's imbalances. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to find a rhythm, her mental energy acting as a buffer, a dampener against the suit's inherent instability. Suddenly, a cascade of tactical information flooded her vision. Targeting reticles appeared, highlighting potential threats. Terrain analysis painted the surrounding environment in stark detail. A combat program, dormant until now, had been activated. And then she saw them. Energy blades sheathed along the forearms and a short-range plasma cannon hidden within the exosuit's shoulder mount. Weapons. This wasn't just a suit of armor, it was a killing machine. A wave of nausea washed over her. Her mental flinch was enough. A stray thought, a moment of panic, and the plasma cannon discharged. A searing blast ripped through the armory, detonating a nearby rack of energy cells. The explosion was contained, but the acrid smell of ionized gas and the shriek of alarms filled the air. Outside, Thompson cursed under his breath. He just intercepted a burst of Draconis comm chatter. Security breach. Armory. Heightened alert. They knew Vega had been detected. He had to move, and fast. Spotting a power junction box, he yanked out his combat knife and jammed it into the wiring. Sparks flew and the lights flickered, then died, plunging the sector into darkness. A diversion, however small. A guttural shout echoed through the darkness. Human, there. A Draconis patrol, alerted by the power outage, had spotted him. Thompson dove behind a stack of crates as plasma fire sizzled overhead. He returned fire, his pulse rifle barking in the confined space. This wasn't a fight he could win. He had to get out, find a safer location, maintain contact with Vega. Slipping through the shadows, Thompson narrowly avoided a plasma blast that vaporized the crate he'd been hiding behind. He scrambled away, adrenaline pumping, knowing he was exposed, vulnerable. He needed to disappear. Inside the armory, Vega, still reeling from the accidental discharge, focused on her comm link. "Thompson, are you there?" Static. Then a faint signal. Using the exosuit's advanced sensors, she pinpointed his location, a flickering blip amidst the chaos. He was in trouble. A schematic of the armory flashed across her vision. A maintenance tunnel, sealed but accessible. Using the exosuit's energy blades, she sliced through the armored door, the metal screaming in protest. As the door hissed open, revealing a narrow passage, Vega hesitated. A Draconis patrol was approaching, their armored forms silhouetted in the dim emergency lights. She activated the exosuit stealth system, the armor plates shifting to a matte black, dampening energy signatures. Moving with newfound confidence, she slipped into the shadows, a silent predator stalking her prey. Thompson, pinned down behind a crumbling wall, checked his ammo. Low. He was out of options. Images flashed through his mind. The burning sky of his lost colony, the faces of the abandoned, the hopeless cries for help. He wouldn't let it happen again. Not to Vega. He would stand, he would fight, he would buy her time. Suddenly, a burst of energy fire erupted from behind the Draconis patrol. Two of the aliens crumpled to the ground, their armor smoking. Vega. She stood in the tunnel entrance, the exosuit a terrifying silhouette against the darkness. But she hadn't killed them, only incapacitated them. A flicker of mercy. Thompson, move. Her voice, distorted by the exosuit's vocoder, was urgent. He didn't hesitate. He scrambled out from behind the wall, joining Vega in the tunnel. As they turned to flee, a piercing shriek filled the air. A distress signal. Reinforcements were on their way. The scrape of plasteel against the tunnel floor echoed in the oppressive darkness. Thompson gripped Vega's arm, urging her forward. Stay close. Power grids shot to hell, but I'm reading a faint thermal signature ahead. Probably another section of the base. Vega stumbled, the exosuit's leg supports jerking spasmodically. The suit. It's becoming difficult to control. The neural interface. It feels fractured. Sparks spat from the suit's shoulder joint, leaving the smell of ozone hanging in the air. Thompson cursed under his breath. He tapped his helmet comm. Static. Damn it, comms are fried. No way to call for backup, no intel updates. He switched frequencies, hoping for a miracle. Nothing but crackling white noise. Ahead, the thermal signature gridded into a narrow opening. Looks like a maintenance tunnel, Thompson said, his voice tight. Might lead us out of this mess. He reached the entrance first, shining his helmet light into the passage. The beam revealed a partially collapsed ceiling, rubble strewn across the floor. Great, just great. Is there another way? Vega's voice betrayed a hint of panic. The exosuit shuddered violently. Thompson knelt, examining the debris. Not without backtracking. This tunnel. It's our best bet, but it's unstable. We need to reinforce it before we try to get through. He pulled a multi-tool from his belt and began scavenging for usable materials. plasteel rods, support brackets, anything that could hold the ceiling. "Give me a hand here, Vega. Need you to hold this strut while I weld it into place." He began to expertly weld the supports. Draconis engineering not part of your curriculum. Vega positioned herself awkwardly, using the exosuit's bulky arms to steady the strut. "My expertise lies elsewhere, Sergeant." "Fair enough." Sparks flew as Thompson worked, the acrid smell of burning metal filling the cramped space. "All right, that should hold." For a minute, Vega activated the exosuit's energy blades. The humming sound intensified, a violet glow illuminating the tunnel. "I can clear some of the debris, but the suit's power cells are fluctuating wildly. This will strain the system. Just do what you can, Vega." "We don't have much choice." With a hiss, the energy blades sliced through the rubble, carving a wider path through the collapsed section. The tunnel groaned in protest, dust raining down from the ceiling. As they moved deeper into the tunnel, Thompson's helmet sensors pinged. Multiple life signs closing in. Draconis, probably scavengers looking for tech. He glanced around, his mind racing. "Vega, behind me." He found a side tunnel and quickly rigged the entrance with a detonator scavenged from a discarded grenade. "When they're inside, I'll collapse the tunnel. Buy us some time." A guttural Draconis voice echoed through the tunnel. "This sector is claimed by the Blood Claw clan. Identify yourselves." Thompson didn't answer. He waited, his pulse pounding in his ears as the Draconis scavengers entered the side tunnel. Click. He triggered the detonator. A muffled explosion shook the tunnel, followed by the sound of falling debris. "Let's move." He grabbed Vega's arm and pulled her forward. Deeper in the tunnel, they found a small alcove, illuminated by a faint green glow. "A medical cache," Vega said, her voice filled with relief. "Draconis, energy crystals. I require them to stabilize my internal energy. My physiology is different from yours, Sergeant. I need those crystals." As Vega reached for the crystals, a red light flashed and a high-pitched whine filled the air. A shimmering blue field sprang into existence, trapping Vega inside the alcove. The exosuit went limp, its systems shutting down. "Containment field," Thompson shouted. "Damn it, it's booby-trapped." He examined the field generator, a complex device covered in Draconis script. "Heavily shielded. Need a Draconis access code to disable it." "Sergeant, the generator, it's overheating." Vega's voice was strained. "The field, it's draining my energy." Thompson scanned the generator, his eyes narrowed. He noticed a cooling system, a series of pipes and vents that were glowing red. "I can't disable it, but maybe I can overload it." He pulled out his multi-tool and began short-circuiting the cooling system, sparks flying as he bypassed the safety protocols. "This is going to get messy." The generator began to vibrate violently, the whine increasing in pitch. "Get back, Vega," Thompson shouted. With a deafening roar, the generator exploded, the containment field collapsing in a shower of sparks. The tunnel ceiling groaned and a section of it caved in, separating Thompson and Vega. Debris slammed into Thompson, knocking him to the ground. Pain lanced through his head and his vision blurred. He blinked, trying to clear his eyes, but all he saw was swirling dust and darkness. "Vega," he yelled, his voice hoarse. "Vega, are you there?" He heard the guttural voices of Draconis patrols, closer now. They weren't osing in. Then a faint hum followed by the grinding of metal. "Sergeant Thompson, I am here." The exosuit sensors, overriding Vega's visual input, flooded her mind with a thermal image of the surroundings. She saw Thompson's heat signature buried under a pile of rubble. She activated the suit's emergency protocols, focusing her telekinetic abilities to clear a path through the debris. Just as a Draconis patrol rounded the corner, energy blades drawn, Vega burst through the rubble, the exosuit's silhouette a terrifying sight in the dim light. She raised the exosuit's plasma cannon. "Stand back." The cannon sputtered, misfiring with a deafening crack. Instead of a controlled burst of plasma, a massive explosion ripped through the tunnel, sending shockwaves that shook the entire structure. Thompson, still dazed, felt himself being lifted off the ground. Vega, using the exosuit's enhanced strength, hauled him away from the blast zone. They stumbled out of the tunnel, emerging on the outskirts of a draconic mining operation, a sprawling complex of refineries and excavation sites. They were on foot, exposed and surrounded by enemies. As they caught their breath, Vega's head snapped up. "Sergeant, I am receiving draconic communications, intercepted transmissions. They are speaking of me." Thompson frowned. "What are they saying?" Vega hesitated, her voice trembling slightly. "They say, my abandonment was not merely due to my disability. They say, I possess a latent psionic potential, that I am too dangerous to be allowed to live." The wind, infused with metallic grit, whipped around them. Sergeant Thompson scanned the horizon, his gaze snagging on the glint of plasteel in the distance, the draconic mining operation. "Damn it," he muttered, the word lost in the whine of distant energy drills. They were exposed. "We need cover now," he barked, his hand instinctively reaching for his pulse rifle. Vega, leaning heavily on him, simply nodded, her violet eyes wide with a mixture of pain and exhaustion. Thompson's gaze swept across the desolate landscape, settling on a hulking silhouette on the edge of the mining zone, a disused ore processing facility. Its skeletal frame was riddled with holes, promising little protection from the elements, let alone a determined draconic patrol, but it was better than nothing. "That facility," he pointed, "looks like it's been out of commission for years. Structurally unsound, but it's our best bet." They moved towards it, Thompson half carrying, half dragging Vega across the uneven terrain. The heat radiating from the metal-rich ground was oppressive, even through his armored boots. Halfway there, Vega stumbled, her knees buckling. Thompson caught her before she fell, her weight heavy in his arms. I can't," she gasped, her voice weak. "The suit, it's failing, no more energy." He glanced at the power indicator on her salvaged exoskeleton, flickering red, almost dead. The suit's internal crystal matrix, her only source of energy, was depleted. "Hang on," Thompson said, his voice strained. He gently lowered her to the ground, the plasteel biting into his knees. He needed to find her a crystal. Scavenging was their only option. He scanned the area, spotting discarded mining equipment scattered around like forgotten toys. "Stay here, I'll be right back." He sprinted towards the nearest pile of scrap, his boots crunching on discarded ore chunks. He rummaged through the debris, his fingers brushing against jagged metal and sparking wires. Finally, he found what he was looking for: several fist-sized energy crystals, still embedded in a broken power conduit. But they were low-grade, almost black with impurities. He knew they wouldn't be enough, but it was all he had. Back at Vega's side, he quickly assessed the situation. "These are not ideal," he admitted, holding up the crystals. "But I think I can jury-rig something." He surveyed the dilapidated facility, his eyes scanning for anything he could use. A broken filtration system, a discarded coolant tank, some lengths of plasteel tubing. It was a long shot, but he had to try. Hours blurred into a frantic dance of salvaged parts and improvised repairs. Thompson, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, worked tirelessly, connecting tubes, rerouting power, and coaxing the broken machinery back to life. Finally, with a sputtering cough, the makeshift purification system sprang to life, bathing the crystals in a weak, pulsating light. "It's not perfect," he said, wiping sweat from his brow, "but it should refine them enough." He carefully fed the purified crystals into Vega's suit. She closed her eyes, her body shuddering as she absorbed the energy. A moment passed, then another. Her eyes snapped open, wider than before, pupils dilated. "Thompson," she whispered, her voice infused with a strange intensity. "Something's wrong." He frowned. "What is it? Are you in pain?" "The crystals, they amplified my abilities," she said, her hands clenching into fists. I can feel everything. The metal, the rocks, the thoughts." A tremor ran through her body and a nearby pile of scrap metal rattled violently. "Control it, Vega," Thompson urged, his voice calm despite the growing unease. "Focus." Inside the ore processing facility, the air was thick with dust and the smell of decay. Thompson examined a damaged automated ore transport vehicle, its massive treads frozen in place. Next to it was a control terminal, its screen cracked and flickering, displaying a single, unhelpful error message. "Damn it," he muttered. "Requires Draconis access key." He turned to Vega, who was sitting on the floor, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I need to bypass this access key. Can you help?" Vega shook her head, her face contorted in pain. "I can't control it, Thompson, the energy. It's too much, it hurts." Thompson sighed. He knew he was on his own. He pulled out his multi-tool, its tiny screen illuminating his determined face. He began to work, his fingers flying across the interface, navigating the complex code. As Thompson worked, a low rumble echoed through the facility. Vega cried out, clutching her head. I can't stop it." Suddenly, the floor buckled beneath them. A section of the ceiling collapsed, showering them with dust and debris. The entire facility groaned under the strain. "Vega," Thompson shouted, scrambling to his feet. "What happened?" I didn't mean to," she stammered, her eyes filled with terror. "It was an accident." The collapse revealed a hidden sublevel, a dark and ominous chasm beneath the ore processing facility. Thompson peered into the darkness, his pulse quickening. "What is that?" He helped Vega to her feet, and together they cautiously approached the edge of the chasm. The air emanating from below was cold and stale, carrying a faint, metallic tang. Thompson activated his helmet lamp, its beam cutting through the darkness, revealing a derelict Draconis research lab. The lab was in a state of disrepair, its equipment broken and scattered across the floor. Wires hung from the ceiling like dead vines, and the walls were covered in strange symbols and diagrams. Thompson's eyes fell on a console, its screen cracked but still displaying faint text. "Psionic dampening field generator offline." He moved further into the lab, Vega closed behind. They passed rows of empty containment chambers, their glass walls shattered. On a table in the center of the room, Thompson found a stack of data logs, their covers faded and cracked. He picked one up, his fingers tracing the Draconis script. "Detailed research logs, Project Chimera," he read aloud. Subject: Draconis psionic abilities. Notes: uncontrolled telekinesis poses a significant threat. Recommend implementation of dampening technology. Thompson flipped through the pages, his expression growing grim. "This lab, it was shut down," he said, his voice low. "Ethical concerns, forced development of psionic abilities in Draconis children." Vega gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She stumbled towards another console, her fingers frantically searching for something. She found it, a single data log, its cover marked with a familiar symbol. "My family," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This log, it's about my family." She began to read, her eyes scanning the Draconis script with increasing horror. "Experiments on my relatives, forced development, dampening." They used them. Tears streamed down her face as she read the truth. Her family had been subjected to unethical research, their psionic abilities exploited and suppressed. Suddenly, the ground trembled. A distant rumble echoed through the facility, growing louder with each passing second. Thompson grabbed Vega's arm, pulling her close. "We have company," he said, his voice urgent. "Draconis Patrol, they felt the tremors and your energy signature." He peered out through a crack in the wall, spotting several Draconis soldiers approaching the ore processing facility, their energy rifles raised. They were trapped. "We need a distraction," Thompson said, his mind racing. "Something to get them off our backs." His eyes fell on the automated ore transport vehicle, still sitting idle in the main facility. "That transport, if I can get it running, I can use it to create a diversion. But it requires a Draconis access key," Vega protested, her voice weak. "I know," Thompson said, his eyes sharp. "I'll bypass it." He glanced at the derelict psionic dampening field generator. The dampening field might interfere, but I have to try. He raced back to the control terminal, his fingers flying across the interface. He worked feverishly, bypassing security protocols, rerouting power and rewriting code. "I can feel you," Vega said, her voice strained, trying to fix the machine. Thompson's face was grim. "I know, it's not working. The dampening field is interfering with the signal." Suddenly, Vega cried out, clutching her head. I can't control it." The entire lab began to shake violently. Equipment rattled, wires sparked, and the air crackled with energy. Thompson glanced at Vega, her eyes glowing with an eerie violet light. "Vega, stop. You're going to bring the whole place down." "I can't." She screamed, her voice filled with pain and terror. "It's too much, I can't control it." Thompson gritted his teeth. He had no choice. He thumped his hand on the activation button, triggering the ore transport. The vehicle sputtered to life, its massive treads grinding against the metal floor. "Get down!" Thompson shouted, throwing himself to the ground. The ore transport lurched forward, smashing through a pile of debris and careening towards the wall. But instead of breaking through, it slammed into a reinforced section, sending a shockwave through the facility. The transport stopped, its engine sputtering and dying. The Draconis patrol, alerted by the noise, stormed into the facility, their energy rifles trained on the sub-level entrance. Vega, panicked and in pain, unleashed a wave of uncontrolled telekinetic energy. Debris flew through the air, slamming into the Draconis soldiers, disorienting them. One soldier was thrown against the wall, his helmet cracking. Another stumbled backwards, his rifle clattering to the floor. The surge of energy overloaded the psionic dampening systems, causing the lab to shake violently. A structural support beam groaned under the strain, then snapped, falling directly towards Thompson. "Thompson!" Vega screamed, her voice filled with terror. The beam crashed down, pinning him beneath its weight, drawing the patrol's full attention. The metallic tang of blood filled Vega's nostrils. Each second felt like a shard of ice against her skin. The Draconis patrol, their heavy footfalls echoed closer, a death knell in the confined space. Save him or flee. The ingrained directive of her species, survival above all, warred with a nascent feeling, something akin to loyalty. She focused, her brow furrowing. The rubble pinning Thompson felt impossibly heavy, a mountain of twisted metal and shattered concrete. Vega extended her mind, picturing the debris as individual blocks, picturing herself lifting them. Raw power surged, amplified by the exoskeleton, but her control remained fractured. The blocks shuddered, groaned, then shifted violently. A section of the ceiling buckled. Dust rained down, stinging her eyes. Another, smaller collapse sealed the existing passage further, adding to the weight on Thompson. "Vega, get out." Thompson's voice, strained but firm, cut through the chaos. "It's not worth it, save yourself." His words struck her like a physical blow. Leave him, abandon him to the Draconis, to certain death. The thought was repulsive. It violated something fundamental within her, a feeling she couldn't yet name but knew was right. Draconis norms be damned. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper but amplified by the suit's comm system. "I will not leave you." She focused again, picturing the debris not as individual blocks but as a single cohesive mass. Thompson, she sensed, was shifting his weight, testing the stability of the remaining rubble. "Easy, Vega," he grunted. "Just a little at a time. I think I can wiggle free if you give me some space." Together they worked. Vega strained, her telekinetic power trembling, and Thompson, with agonizing slowness, inched his way forward. Finally, with a shower of sparks and crumbling concrete, he was free, crawling out from under the weight. Before they could celebrate, a searing beam of plasma fire ripped through the air where Thompson had been moments before. The patrol had arrived. "Move." Thompson yelled, grabbing Vega's arm. He pulled her towards the newly created, albeit smaller, passage a claustrophobic tunnel barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. They scrambled through the opening, the acrid smell of burnt metal filling their lungs. Plasma fire sizzled behind them, impacting the already unstable structure. The passage led downwards into the darkness. They emerged into a vast, echoing chamber. The air hung thick and cold, carrying the scent of ozone and antiseptic. Banks of humming machinery lined the walls, their surfaces covered in a film of dust. This wasn't just a storage area, it was a hidden research lab. Thompson activated his helmet light, its beam cutting through the gloom. In the center of the chamber stood a row of massive, sealed doors, each bearing warning symbols in Draconis script. He approached the nearest control panel, his fingers flying across the interface. "Security protocols. Ancient," he muttered, "but I think I can override them." After a tense minute of frantic coding, the door hissed open, revealing a scene that made Vega's breath catch in her throat. Inside, bathed in the eerie blue glow of cryogenic lighting, stood rows of stasis pods. Within each pod floated a Draconis, frozen in time. Thompson moved closer, examining the readouts on the pods. Cryogenic stasis. Looks like long-term storage. Vega accessed the lab's data logs, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface. The information scrolled past, a chilling chronicle of scientific ambition and ethical compromise. The Draconis in stasis weren't simply being stored, they were failed experiments, deemed too dangerous, too unstable for integration into Draconis society. Then, Vega saw a familiar face. Her breath hitched. Suspended in one of the pods, her features pale and serene, was her aunt, Lyra, a renowned psionic researcher who had disappeared years ago, her fate a mystery whispered about in hushed tones. The logs revealed Lyra's research, a radical attempt to amplify psionic abilities through genetic modification and crystal resonance. The same method that had given Vega her own powers, the same method that had been deemed too risky by the Draconis High Council. Suddenly, the lights flickered. The hum of the machinery faltered, replaced by a discordant whine. Red warning lights flashed across the control panels. One of the cryogenic chambers began to malfunction, its internal temperature rising. The Draconis inside stirred. "What's happening?" Thompson asked, his voice tight with concern. Vega consulted the logs again. The psionic dampening field. "It's partially reactivating, but weaker than before. My powers are fluctuating." She could feel it, a tingling sensation behind her eyes, a sense of both amplified potential and impending loss of control. The sealed door behind them hissed open. The Draconis patrol, led by a hulking soldier with a plasma rifle, stormed into the chamber. Thompson reacted instantly. He grabbed Vega, pulling her towards the malfunctioning cryogenic chamber. "Help me." Together, they manipulated the controls, overriding the safety protocols. A blast of supercooled gas erupted from the chamber, engulfing the lead soldier in a cloud of frost. He staggered, his movements slowing, his rifle clattering to the floor. As the remaining soldiers recovered, Thompson and Vega fled, using the incapacitated soldier as a momentary distraction. They plunged deeper into the lab, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. In the chaos, they were separated. Vega found herself standing before another row of cryogenic chambers. The malfunctioning pod had fully thawed, its occupant now standing before her. It was Lyra, her aunt. She was disoriented, her eyes unfocused, her movements jerky. She muttered incoherently about the dangers of uncontrolled power, about the price of ambition. Suddenly, Lyra lashed out, her telekinetic power raw and untamed. The air crackled with energy. Vega threw up her hands, bracing for the impact. But instead of attacking, Lyra inadvertently blasted a section of the wall behind the cryogenic chamber, revealing a hidden escape tunnel. Then, exhausted, she collapsed to the floor. Vega stared at the tunnel, then back at her aunt, then back at the tunnel. The sounds of the patrol were growing closer. Save her aunt and try to escape together. Or leave her and try to find Thompson before it was too late. Rescue Thompson. The thought solidified in Vega's mind, a beacon cutting through the fog of conflicting loyalties. Her lips tightened, a decision made. She spun on her heel, ignoring the growing unease in her chest, the whisper of guilt for abandoning her aunt, however briefly. She will be all right. She must. As Vega turned back toward the lab's depths, her aunt's psionic backlash intensified. The overhead lights flickered violently, casting strobing shadows that danced across the metallic walls. Alarms blared, a cacophony of screeching sirens and pulsing klaxons that echoed through the facility. The air tasted of ozone, sharp and stinging in her nostrils. Separated from Vega and deep within the lab's maze of corridors, Thompson moved with practiced efficiency. Years of marine training had honed his senses, turning him into a predator in environments far less hostile than this. He hugged the shadows, his boots silent on the grated metal floor. A Draconis patrol rounded the corner ahead, their energy rifles spitting bolts of emerald light. Thompson ducked into a side passage, the acrid smell of burnt wiring filling his lungs. He set an improvised trap, a tripwire connected to a fallen shelf of volatile chemicals. A gamble, but it might buy him time. He pressed onward, deeper into the lab, and stumbled upon a hidden cache. Experimental weapons lay scattered on a table, bathed in the eerie green glow of emergency lighting. His gaze snagged on a device, a telekinetic disruptor, its housing cracked and wires exposed. Designed to counter Draconis psionic abilities, according to the faded label, but clearly in need of recalibration. A potential game changer. Vega burst into the corridor, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Thompson, you need to leave. Now, my aunt. She's unstable," the energy surge. "It's getting worse." Her blue eyes were wide with alarm, reflecting the chaotic light. Even as she spoke, a monstrous roar echoed from the depths of the lab. The ground trembled. Vega flinched, a tremor running through her small frame. Her aunt had broken free. The cryogenic chamber lay in ruins, shattered plasteel and frozen vapor clinging to the air. Standing amidst the wreckage was the Draconis matron, but twisted, warped. Her eyes burned with an unnatural light, and her telekinetic aura crackled with uncontrolled energy. The very air around her seemed to distort and shimmer. Cracks spiderwebbed across the walls. Debris rained down from the ceiling. The lab, already damaged, was now on the verge of collapse, the aunt's uncontrolled telekinesis acting as a wrecking ball. The facility wouldn't hold for long. Thompson stared at the disruptor. If he could get it working, it might neutralize the ant's powers, stop the chain reaction. But the calibration was crucial. A misstep could amplify her abilities, making the situation even more catastrophic. "Can you help me with this?" he asked Vega, already knowing the answer. Vega took a step toward her aunt, her hands outstretched. "Auntie, please stop this. What are you doing?" Her voice was filled with desperate pleading, the voice of a child trying to reason with a monster. But her aunt was too far gone, consumed by paranoia and a lust for power. Thompson worked feverishly on the disruptor, his fingers flying across the damaged control panel. As he bypassed a fried circuit, a jolt of psionic feedback slammed into him. Visions flooded his mind. Grotesque experiments, Draconis scientists dissecting alien creatures, weapons being tested on unwilling subjects. He saw their ambition, their hunger for power, their cold, calculating disregard for life. He understood now. The Draconis weren't just studying psionic abilities. They were attempting to weaponize them, to create an army of telekinetic soldiers for galactic conquest. Their internal conflicts, the lab's abandonment, it was all a result of their own ruthless ambition. Vega was forced to defend herself. Her aunt lashed out with a telekinetic wave, sending equipment flying and slamming Vega against a wall. She cried out in pain but quickly righted herself, her own telekinetic abilities flaring to life, creating a shimmering shield against her aunt's attacks. But Vega was outmatched, her power a mere flicker compared to her aunt's raging storm. Almost got it, Thompson grunted, sweat dripping from his brow. He stared at the readings. The disruptor needed a psionic amplifier to fully function, to focus its energy into a coherent beam, and he knew who could provide it. Vega, I need you to channel your powers into this. Vega's eyes widened. But that's insane. It could overload me or amplify her even more. It's the only chance we've got, Thompson said, his voice firm. I'll guide you, trust me. Vega hesitated, torn between fear and desperation. She looked at Thompson, saw the unwavering perseverance in his eyes and a spark of something else, hope. She made her choice. Okay, she whispered. I trust you. She reached out, her hands hovering over the disruptor. A faint blue glow emanated from her fingertips, growing stronger as she focused her will. The device hummed, then vibrated violently. Energy crackled around her, making her hair stand on end. As Vega channeled her power, the disruptor emitted a focused beam of energy, a lance of pure white light that struck the ant squarely in the chest. The matron staggered back, her rampage momentarily halted. Her eyes flickered, and for a brief, fleeting moment, sanity returned. Thompson seized the opportunity. He lunged forward, grabbing the ant's arms, attempting to restrain her before she regained her senses. It was a desperate move, putting himself directly in harm's way, but he had to try. Suddenly, the corridor doors hissed open and the Draconis patrol stormed in, their weapons raised. They opened fire, energy bolts searing through the air. The three-way conflict had begun. Reacting instinctively, Vega unleashed a focused burst of telekinesis, creating a shimmering shield around Thompson and her aunt. The energy bolts slammed against the barrier, dissipating harmlessly. Thompson cursed. No, Vega, stop. You're creating an implosion, the shield. It's going to crush us. He quickly reconfigured the disruptor, rerouting its power flow, turning it into something else entirely. A telekinetic amplifier designed to boost Vega's abilities to an unprecedented level. Sparks flew as Thompson ripped open the disruptor's casing, the scent of ozone stinging his nostrils. Almost there, he muttered, fingers flying across the alien circuitry. This is going to hurt, Vega, a lot, but it's the only way. He twisted a final connection. Telekinetic amplifier ready, but unstable. We have seconds. Focus on containing her, not shielding, Thompson instructed, his voice tight with urgency. Create a cage, a prison. Vega's brow furrowed, her face contorted in concentration. A shimmering, translucent field flickered into existence around her aunt, the air within it crackling with barely suppressed energy. He could see the strain etched on Vega's face, sweat beading on her forehead. The amplifier hummed, a high-pitched whine that threatened to shatter glass. The Draconis patrol, recovering from their initial shock, opened fire. Plasma blasts sizzled past, impacting against the lab equipment. Thompson dragged Vega behind a reinforced console, the air thick with the smell of burning plastic. The telekinetic field shimmered, deflecting some of the shots. A stray blast grazed the amplifier, sending a shower of sparks. The humming intensified, then sputtered, becoming erratic. It's failing. Vega gasped, her control wavering. The containment field pulsed, its edges blurring. Vega's aunt seized the opportunity, her eyes blazing with psionic energy. Thompson felt a wave of mental pressure, a crushing weight that threatened to overwhelm his mind. Vega cried out, clutching her head. Thompson, despite the throbbing in his temples, noticed a pattern in her aunt's attacks, a subtle flicker in her psionic output on the left side of her head. Her left temple, Vega, focus your energy there. I think she was injured there a long time ago. Vega hesitated, her eyes filled with conflict. I can't hurt her like that. She's not herself, Vega. She's going to kill us all, including herself, if you don't stop her. That's not your aunt in there. You have to be decisive. Thompson's voice was harsh, but his eyes held a plea. Vega closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and steeled her commitment. The shimmering field around her aunt intensified, focusing into a pinpoint of raw telekinetic force. A beam of pure energy slammed into her aunt's left temple. The Draconis woman screamed, a sound filled with pain and rage, then collapsed unconscious to the floor. The Draconis patrol ceased fire, stunned into silence. They stared at Vega, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. Then one of them snarled, "Traitor," and raised his weapon. Thompson, seizing the moment, grabbed a discarded pulse rifle from the floor. He returned fire, the rifle bucking in his hands, pinning down the patrol behind overturned tables. Suddenly, a searing pain ripped through his side. He staggered, clutching his abdomen. A plasma blast had found its mark, burning through his armor. He tasted blood in his mouth. Vega screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed through the lab. The air crackled with uncontrolled energy. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light. A wave of telekinetic force erupted from her, ripping the weapons from the hands of the Draconis patrol and slamming them against the walls. The soldiers themselves were flung against the lab equipment, pinned and helpless. A new voice, cold and filled with disdain, cut through the chaos. Disgusting, a cripple empowered by a human contamination. A Draconis commander strode into the lab, his face contorted with revulsion. Vega stood tall, her eyes blazing with defiance. His compassion is not contamination. It is strength, something you will never understand. The commander's eyes narrowed. You are a lost cause, a traitor to your species. Execute her immediately. Before the patrol could react, alarms blared, red lights flashing. A voice, crackling over the comm system, announced, "Unidentified vessels approaching. Multiple human military signatures detected." The air crackled. Human dropships, sleek and utilitarian, slammed onto the plasteel deck, their retro thrusters screaming against the ruined landscape. Ramps hissed down, disgorging heavily armed Marines in powered armor. Their weapons, pulse rifles humming with contained energy, swung in practiced arcs, securing the lab area. Red targeting lasers painted both the Draconis commander and Vega, a stark reminder of the new power dynamic. A medic, face grim, knelt beside Thompson, a scanner tracing the lines of the plasma burn on his shoulder. "Sergeant, you took a nasty one. We're pumping in coagulant now. Hold still." A woman's voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the din. "All units secure the perimeter." Captain Rostova commanding, "I want a full sweep of this facility and a sitrep in 5 minutes." Rostova, tall and wiry with close-cropped hair, strode into the makeshift command center, her gaze sweeping over the scene with practiced efficiency. "What's the situation here?" The Draconis commander, chest puffed out, attempted to regain control. "This human is interfering with a lawful prisoner transfer. The Draconis female is a combatant and is to be returned to our custody immediately." Rostova leveled a cold stare. "Your attempt to execute her on the battlefield violates established galactic protocols regarding prisoners of war. That display of cruelty nullifies any claim you have." She turned to a nearby Marine. "Place the Draconis female under our protection. See to her immediate medical needs." The Draconis commander's scales rippled with suppressed fury. "You dare defy a Draconis officer? This is an act of war." Rostova's expression did not change. "Stand down, Commander. That is an order." The Draconis contingent, though visibly jam-packed, remained in place. Thompson, wincing as the medic adjusted the bandage on his shoulder, pushed himself to his feet. "Captain, I need to speak with you, privately." Rostova's gaze narrowed. "Sergeant, you're injured. This can wait." "It can't, ma'am. It's about her." He gestured towards Vega, who watched the unfolding scene with wide, apprehensive eyes. Rostova led Thompson to a small, relatively intact room. "All right, Sergeant, you have 2 minutes, and I expect a coherent explanation for why you interfered with a Draconis engagement." "She was abandoned, Captain, left for dead. They were going to execute her." Rostova's expression hardened. "Sergeant, I understand you have a good record, but sentimentality has no place on the battlefield. Our priority is human lives, not coddling alien combatants." I intercepted their comms, Captain, Thompson countered, his voice firm despite the pain. They were talking about her, about Draconis societal values. They consider her flawed because of her legs. Rostova's eyes flickered with a hint of surprise. Flawed, disabled, Thompson clarified. They see her as a burden, a weakness. They intended to kill her because of it. Rostova remained silent for a moment, then nodded curtly. All right, I'll take that into consideration, but she still needs a thorough medical examination. I need to know if she's a threat to our personnel. Two medics clad in sterile suits approached Vega. Draconis female, please come with us. We need to examine your injuries. Vega flinched, recoiling from their touch. Her eyes darted around the room, a trapped animal searching for escape. The memory of the Draconis commander's betrayal, the cold indifference in his eyes, was fresh in her mind. Thompson stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Vega's arm. It's okay. They're going to help you. They're doctors. Like I said, they want to help. He spoke slowly and deliberately, his voice gentle. They just need to check you over. Vega hesitated, then met Thompson's gaze. There was something in his eyes, a genuine warmth and concern that resonated with her. Slowly, cautiously, she nodded. The medics guided Vega to a nearby medical bay. Their scanners hummed, bathing her in cool light. Her lower body is a complete loss, Captain, one of the medics reported. Extensive nerve damage and tissue disintegration. Also, we're detecting unusual energy signatures, faint telekinetic abilities. Rostova, standing outside the bay, listened intently. The report confirmed what Thompson had suspected, but the mention of telekinetic abilities was unexpected. Telekinetic? Rostova asked, her brow furrowed. The medic nodded. Weak, but definitely present. It seems focused around her head and upper torso. It could be a natural Draconis ability or a result of some kind of augmentation. Rostova turned away, her mind racing. The situation had just become significantly more complicated. She paced, considering the implications. Was Vega a valuable asset, a potential weapon, or simply a liability? The ethical implications took a toll on her. Could they trust her? Thompson approached, his face etched with concern. Captain, she's scared. She doesn't understand what's happening. Sergeant, we need to consider all possibilities. She's an alien combatant, potentially dangerous. But she's also intelligent, Captain, and she has abilities we don't understand. If we can gain her trust, she could be invaluable in understanding the Draconis, maybe even ending this conflict. Rostova stopped pacing, her gaze hardening. That's a big if, Sergeant, and the risk is substantial. What if she turns against us? What if the Draconis manipulate her? Suddenly, the air filled with the crackle of energy weapons. Alarms blared. The Draconis commander, ignoring Rostova's orders, had launched a desperate attack, his remaining forces firing on the medical bay. Breach! Breach in Sector 4. A Marine yelled over the comms. Vega, startled by the sudden violence, instinctively reacted. A wave of telekinetic force erupted from her, slamming the Draconis soldiers back against the wall. Medical equipment levitated, forming a protective barrier around the human doctors. Rostova, witnessing Vega's selfless act, stared in stunned disbelief. The Draconis commander was rogue. He had violated direct orders to stand down. But more significantly, Vega had chosen to defend the humans despite her fear and mistrust. The captain's eyes narrowed. All units return fire. Eliminate the Draconis threat, and get that Draconis girl to safety. Rostova paused, then spoke with a newfound drive. She's with us now. The acrid scent of burnt circuitry stung Thompson's nostrils. A fine layer of soot coated everything, the metallic tang of blood mixing with the ozone. The Draconis commander's attack had been fierce, but the reinforced plasteel bulkheads had held. Minimal casualties, thankfully, but the lab had taken a beating. Ignoring the throbbing in his left arm where a shard of shrapnel had nicked him, Thompson moved towards the shielded alcove where he'd left Vega. He found her huddled in the corner, her scaled hands clasped tightly together. Vega, He kept his voice low, gentle. Her head snapped up, her large violet eyes wide with fear. "Sergeant Thompson, I am so sorry." He knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. Her skin felt cold, clammy. "Hey, it's okay, you're safe now, we're all safe." "But the attack, it was because of me, wasn't it? I am a burden, a cause of conflict." Her voice was barely a whisper, infused with a chilling despair. Thompson squeezed her hand, his gaze firm. "That's not true, Vega. You're not a burden. They attack because they want something. Something you have, maybe, but it's not your fault." Captain Rostova approached, her face grim but resolute. "Sergeant, report to medical for treatment. I'll stay with Vega." She turned to Vega, her voice softening slightly. "We're increasing security around you, Vega. Consider it. Protective custody." As Thompson allowed himself to be led away, 2 medics began to check Vega's vitals. He could hear Rostova giving orders to reinforce the alcove's shielding. He paused at the doorway, looking back at Vega's worried face. Later, after a cursory patching up of his arm, Thompson found Rostova reviewing Vega's medical data on a holopad. "Anything new, Captain?" Rostova looked up, her brow furrowed. The doctors flagged some anomalies in her neural activity. Higher than average telekinetic potential, significantly so. It's faint, almost imperceptible, but it's there. Thompson frowned. Telekinetic. "I thought the Draconis only had limited telepathic abilities. Apparently Vega is different." Rostova swiped at the holopad, bringing up a complex schematic. "When I asked her about it, she said that she had suppressed her abilities, fearing ostracization. The Draconis, it seems, have a complicated relationship with those who deviate from their norm. They are very proud and very rigid in their views." Thompson remembered the state he found her in on the battlefield. "So they left her for dead because she was different." Rostova nodded grimly. "Essentially, strength is valued above all else." Thompson clenched his fist. "That's messed up." He looked back at the alcove. "She needs to embrace those abilities, not hide them. She could contribute to the war effort, to our effort." Rostova sighed. "I agree, Sergeant. I'm drafting a report to my superiors now. I need to convince them that Vega is more than just a refugee, she's a potential asset." She paused. "But they'll be concerned about trusting an alien, especially one with potential." "We can vouch for her," Thompson said firmly. A few hours later, Rostova summoned Thompson. "I've briefed command. They've authorized a controlled evaluation of Vega's telekinetic capabilities." "What kind of evaluation?" Thompson asked, his voice wary. "A simulated combat scenario," Rostova replied. "Controlled environment, non-lethal projectiles. We need to see what she's capable of." The simulated combat arena was a scaled-down replica of a Draconis city street. Drones zipped through the air, firing paint rounds at pre-programmed targets. Vega, fitted with a neural interface, sat in the center of the arena, her eyes closed, concentrating. At first, nothing happened. Then a faint shimmer appeared around one of the drones. It faltered, its trajectory wobbling erratically. Slowly, deliberately, Vega began to manipulate the drone, guiding it through a complex series of maneuvers. The drone danced through the air, dodging obstacles and accurately targeting the simulated enemies. The human observers watched in stunned silence. Vega's control was remarkable, her precision exceeding all expectations. She was not just moving the drones, she was piloting them with her mind. Thompson watched, a swell of pride rising in his chest. He had seen hardened Marines crumble under pressure, but Vega, despite her trauma and physical limitations, was thriving. As the simulation ended, Vega opened her eyes, her face flushed with exertion. She looked at Thompson, a shy smile gracing her lips. She tentatively reached out with her mind, playfully nudging him in the shoulder with a gentle telekinetic push. Thompson chuckled, a warmth spreading through him. "Not bad, Vega, not bad at all." Suddenly, the door to the observation room hissed open and a tall, imposing figure strode in. Admiral Parada. Rostova visibly stiffened. Captain Rostova, Perida's voice was gravelly, his eyes cold and calculating. I've reviewed your report on this. Draconis, I'm here to assess her personally. Rostova saluted crisply. Admiral, I wasn't expecting you. Perida ignored her, his gaze fixed on Vega. So this is the alien with the potential. I have my doubts about her loyalty, Captain. Her motives are questionable at best. He turned back to Rostova. I want her to undergo a series of psychological evaluations. Full spectrum, I want to know what she's hiding. Rostova hesitated. Admiral, with all due respect, Vega has already suffered significant trauma. Intensive psychological evaluations could be detrimental. Perida waved his hand dismissively. Collateral damage is acceptable. I need to know where her allegiance lies. Schedule the evaluations immediately. The psychological evaluations were brutal. Hours of relentless questioning, probing Vega's deepest fears and insecurities. The questions were designed to break her down, to expose any hidden agendas. Thompson watched from behind the one-way mirror, his stomach churning. He could see the strain on Vega's face, the subtle tremors in her hands. Rostova stood beside him, her expression tight with concern. This is excessive, Admiral. She's not a threat. Everyone is a potential threat, Captain, Perida retorted, his voice devoid of emotion. Especially aliens. The evaluations revealed the deep-seated trauma from the Draconis betrayal, the ingrained mistrust of authority figures. They were tearing her apart piece by piece. Rostova turned to Perida, her voice filled with anger. Admiral, this is inhumane. You're re-traumatizing her. These methods are only going to make this worse. Perida didn't even look at her. I plan to weaponize her abilities for strategic advantage, regardless of the consequences. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the base. Red lights flashed. A voice crackled over the intercom. Attention, attention. Multiple unidentified vessels detected approaching the system. Draconis fleet inbound. Repeat, Draconis fleet inbound. Prepare for large-scale assault. And begins immediate preparations to integrate Vega into the battle plan, his eyes gleaming with a disturbing intensity. The medical bay, moments before a sanctuary, now felt like a staging ground for something far more sinister. He gestured to a technician, who wheeled in a complex device overflowing with wires and glowing nodes. This, Perida announced, his voice ringing with false enthusiasm, is a neural interface. It will amplify your gifts, Draconis, allow you to strike directly at the heart of their fleet. Thompson stepped forward, his voice tight. Admiral, with all due respect, she's barely recovered. Forcing her to use that thing, it could fry her mind. We don't know the long-term effects. He remembered the colony worlds, the faces of the children, and how the military would use anyone as a weapon. Perida rounded on him, his face hardening. Sergeant, your concern is noted, but we are facing annihilation. Sacrifices must be made. This device will allow her to target their command ships, cripple their coordination. We end this here. He dismissed Thompson with a wave of his hand. Prepare the interface. Later, as technicians swarmed around Vega, attaching sensors to her temples, Rostova approached Thompson, her face etched with worry. Douglas, be careful. I've seen Perida push others too far. He sees Vega as a weapon, not a person. I don't trust him. Her voice was barely a whisper, a clandestine warning passed in the chaos. The klaxons blared, shaking the base. Red lights pulsed, casting long, distorted shadows. Draconis fleet entering the system. A voice crackled over the intercom. Prepare for immediate engagement. Perida, oblivious to Rostova's warning, barked orders. Activate the interface. Draconis, target their flagship. End this. Vega, her face pale, looked at Thompson, her eyes pleading. He wanted to tell her to refuse, to run, but the weight of the colony, the desperate hope clinging to every soul, pressed down on them both. She nodded slowly, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. I'll do what I can. The technicians flipped a series of switches. The neural interface hummed, bathing Vega in an eerie blue light. Her body stiffened, then arched as the device took hold. A low moan escaped her lips. "Focus, Draconis," Parada urged, his voice filled with impatience. "Target their command ship, now." Vega closed her eyes, concentrating. A web of shimmering energy emanated from her forehead, reaching out into the void. Then a flicker of surprise, followed by a grimace of pain. I can hear them," she gasped, her voice strained. "Their thoughts. Their strategy." A wave of nausea washed over her. "They know what I am doing. They call me traitor." Suddenly, Vega's body convulsed. The blue light intensified, then fractured into a chaotic storm of energy. Alarms screamed. The technicians scrambled back in terror. "She's losing control," one of them shouted. "The feedback is overloading the system." Thompson didn't hesitate. He shoved past the technicians, ignoring Parada's roar of protest, and ripped the neural interface from Vega's head. Sparks flew. The blue light vanished. Vega collapsed, gasping for breath. "Arrest him," Parada bellowed, his face contorted with rage. "That man is guilty of treason. He interfered with a strategic asset." Two guards moved to seize Thompson, but Rostova stepped in front of them, her weapon raised. "Stand down, that device was killing her." A heartbeat hung in the air, thick with tension. Rostova's eyes flickered between Parada and Thompson, a silent battle raging within her. Then she made her choice. She turned her weapon on the guards. "Get them out of here, now." Thompson didn't waste a second. He scooped Vega into his arms, her body limp and unresponsive. Rostova covered their retreat, firing a volley of shots to keep Parada's forces at bay. They fled through the labyrinthine corridors of the base, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. Rostova led them to a damaged section, sealed off after a previous attack. They slammed the emergency door shut, the heavy metal groaning as it locked. "This won't hold them for long," Rostova said, her voice tight. "We need to find somewhere safe." The intercom crackled to life, overriding the emergency broadcast system. "Attention all personnel. A high-priority target has been identified. The colony's central power generator. Draconis forces are attempting to disable it. All units report to Sector Gamma immediately." Vega stirred in Thompson's arms, her eyes fluttering open. She looked around, disoriented. "The power generator," she murmured, her voice weak. "They want to cut off our defenses." Then her eyes widened with realization. I can feel it, the energy flow. I can protect it." Without that thing, Thompson looked at Rostova, a spark of hope igniting in his eyes. "Can she do it?" Rostova nodded grimly. "It's our only chance, but it will take precise control, and she's still recovering." "We need to get to the generator," Thompson said, his voice firm. "Rostova, can you get us there?" "I know a route," she replied, her expression resolute. "But Parada will be expecting us. He won't let us get away that easily." As they prepared to move, Vega looked up at Thompson, her eyes filled with a newfound purpose. "I won't let them win." They moved swiftly, Rostova leading the way through the darkened corridors. Suddenly, around a corner, they saw Parada and a squad of soldiers, weapons raised. "There they are." Parada shouted, his voice filled with venom. "Seize the Draconis and arrest those traitors." He pointed directly at Vega. "Surrender the alien and I promise you a quick trial." Parada's shuttle descended, kicking up dust as it landed before them. He emerged, flanked by two heavily armed Draconis guards, his face a mask of fury. "Thompson, Rostova, traitors. Surrender the Draconis at once or face execution for treason." Vega, standing between them, felt the weight of his words, the familiar sting of Draconis prejudice. But something had changed. The fear was gone, replaced by a quiet tenacity. She stepped forward, her voice clear and strong, amplified by the translator in her throat. "Parada, I will not cooperate. Your ruthlessness, your willingness to sacrifice innocent lives for your ambition is not the Draconis way. I declare my independence from your control." A ripple of surprise went through the Draconis soldiers. Parada's face contorted with rage. "Insolent whelp, you dare defy me." As if on cue, the ground trembled. More Draconis shuttles descended in the distance, reinforcements arriving to secure the colony. But before they could fully deploy, Vega closed her eyes, focusing her mind. A shimmering, almost invisible field sprang into existence around the human settlement, encompassing the Draconis ships as well. Weapons systems flickered, sputtered, and died. The Draconis soldiers stared in bewildered confusion, their advanced technology rendered useless. The humans, however, remained unaffected. "My telekinesis," Vega explained, her voice strained but determined. "It's disrupting their weapons. A localized field. It won't hold forever, but it will give you a chance to get away." Thompson, his mind racing, saw an opportunity. "She's right. But getting away isn't enough. We need to end this." He looked at Vega, an idea forming. "Can you manipulate energy grids?" Vega nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. "The colony's power grid. I could redirect it to reinforce the Draconis ship's shields," Rostova finished, allowing them to withdraw safely. Working together, Thompson, Rostova, and Vega raced to the colony's central power station. Thompson, with his knowledge of human engineering, guided Vega as she used her telekinetic abilities to reroute the energy flow. Rostova, meanwhile, coordinated with the Draconis fleet, explaining the plan and urging them to trust Vega's solution. Initially, the Draconis commanders were skeptical. But as Vega's modifications took effect, their shields visibly strengthened, deflecting incoming fire with ease. Recognizing the effectiveness of her plan, they began a controlled withdrawal, ship after ship peeling away from the conflict, their energy shields holding strong. Parada, witnessing his carefully laid plans crumbling around him, roared in frustration. He drew his sidearm, aiming it at the power conduits Vega was manipulating. "I will not allow this. This is weakness." Before he could fire, his own soldiers seized him, disarming him and pinning him to the ground. "Enough, Parada," one of them shouted. "Your fanaticism has cost us too much. We will not sacrifice more lives for your ambition." With Parada subdued and the Draconis fleet withdrawing, a tense silence fell over the colony. Thompson approached Vega, a mixture of relief and awe in his eyes. "You did it. You saved them." Vega smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached her eyes. "We did it together. The fighting was over. Now the real work began." Thompson, Rostova, and Vega initiated the process of establishing a joint settlement, a place where humans and Draconis could coexist in peace. Vega used her telekinetic abilities to construct housing and infrastructure that catered to both species' needs. Domes of shimmering energy provided shelter for the Draconis, while more familiar plasteel structures housed the humans. Gardens bloomed with earth plants and Draconis flora, creating a vibrant, integrated landscape. Word of the colony's success spread quickly. Refugees from both sides, weary of the endless war, flocked to the settlement, seeking a safe haven from the conflict. The colony, once a battlefield, became a beacon of hope. Thompson and Vega, working side by side, implemented a new educational system that promoted understanding and respect between the two cultures. Children learned each other's languages, customs, and histories, fostering empathy and breaking down the barriers of prejudice. Rostova, her leadership skills honed by years of military service, became a key figure in the newly formed government, advocating for peaceful coexistence and mutual support. She ensured that all refugees, regardless of their species, were treated with dignity and respect. And then, a new generation was born. Human Draconis children, raised in an environment of acceptance and equality, their laughter echoing through the shared spaces of the colony. They represented the promise of a brighter future, a world where differences were celebrated, not feared. Years later, Thompson and Vega stood overlooking the thriving settlement, the twin suns of the planet casting a warm glow on the integrated landscape. The colony was a testament to the power of compassion, understanding, and the indomitable human spirit. Vega, now fitted with advanced prosthetic legs, crafted by human and Draconis engineers, walked with newfound confidence. She raised her hand, her eyes sparkling with telekinetic energy, and gently guided a massive solar panel into place, completing a colony-wide project to harness the planet's abundant energy. The panel clicked into place, bathing the settlement in a wave of clean